Well, good morning, and thank you all so much for being here. I am happy to announce that this morning I'm joined by a very special guest, State Representative Rick Roth, who you'll be hearing from later. Representative Roth represents District 85, which includes part of the city of West Palm Beach. He was first elected to the Florida House of Representatives in 2016, and Representative Roth is the alternating chair of the Joint Administrative Procedures Committee. He is vice chair of the Children, Families, and Seniors Subcommittee, and he's a member of 3 other committees. He has been a wonderful friend to the city of West Palm Beach. Representative, it's an honor to welcome you to City Hall this morning. And thank you all for joining me this morning and hearing today's important announcement. I'm also joined by Assistant City Administrator Armando Fana, who oversees both our engineering services and public utilities departments, which jointly have been advancing an important flooding mitigation initiative about which Representative Roth and I will provide an update. As it is for many cities nationwide, climate change remains a critical concern for the city of West Palm Beach. All across South Florida, we have seen the impacts of climate change in the form of coastal flooding as a result of sea level rise. Here in West Palm Beach, we continue to see intermittent coastal flooding, particularly along Flagler Drive, and especially during what we call king tides. This obviously is to the great dismay of our residents and certainly to my administration. Not only is it an inconvenience, but it can also be a safety hazard. Now, fortunately, West Palm Beach is poised to fare climate change's ill effects better than most coastal Florida cities because our city's geophysical attributes and our proactive response to hardening infrastructure among other critical actions, are among the critical actions that we have taken. Given that coastal flooding is a result of sea level rise, it remains a nagging concern in our city, and so we've already initiated and prioritized a project specifically designed to address it. Construction for the West Palm Beach Flood Mitigation Tidal Valve project was initiated late last year. The project involves the installation of tidal check valves on existing stormwater outfall pipes to the Lake Worth Lagoon at 35 locations in our city. Tidal check valves prevent seawater from backing up into drainage infrastructure while still allowing the outfall to drain. Tidal check valves can help alleviate tidal flooding. So during the first phase of the project, we piloted the valves at 4 outfalls along South Flagler Drive, between Southern Boulevard and Greenwood Drive. Now, during phase 2, we are moving forward with the installation of 31 additional outfalls along North and South Flagler Drive. In just a few moments, Assistant City Administrator Armando Fana will give you the details of the neighborhoods and where the installations are taking place. The project itself costs over $800,000, and we expect completion in late 2022. So recently, the City of West Palm Beach received a grant from the state of Florida thanks to the efforts of Representative Roth. In Tallahassee, during last year's legislative session, Representative Roth supported a bill to fund tidal valves on behalf of the city. And fortunately, Governor Ron DeSantis approved the budget in July. So I'm proud to share that, thanks especially to Representative Roth and Governor DeSantis, the city will be reimbursed up to $105,000 to construct 7 tidal valves. Representative Roth, on behalf of the residents of the city of West Palm Beach, we thank you for your support of the city and for advocating on our behalf in Tallahassee. These funds will be applied to a project that I know will help our city build resilience to coastal flooding as a result of sea level rise. Thank you for all you have done to make this possible. I assure you it is money that will be well spent. And Representative, would you like to say a few words, please?
Thank you, Mayor, and it's always a funny question asking a representative if he wants to say a few words. So I would like to make a couple of comments. One of the things we do as state representatives is really try to figure out how the state of Florida can help our counties and our cities. And we do have an appropriation process that deals with that. Part of the secret of getting this tidal valve project funded is it is a top priority of our governor and our speaker, Sprouse. Sea level rise resiliency became an issue 2 years ago when we started putting into place planning efforts. So we now have a planning effort to make sure that any kind of infrastructure that's being built along the coast of Florida. Folks, we have 1,300 miles of coastline in Florida. Is sea level rise resiliency an issue? Of course it is. And we are going to do our part as the state legislature to make sure that our cities and counties have grant funding and other types of funding and appropriation. So I saw this as a really good opportunity for the city of West Palm Beach. As a farmer, I live and die economically by preventing flooding. I have to daily worry about excess rainfall and flooding in my farming operations. So when I saw this project was brought to me by my good friend Tom DeRita. This is an excellent project. I said, this is something I can really get my hands around. And I knew, sir, that the governor would support this effort. So this is a great effort. And folks, it's more important, I think we should all agree, it's more important to figure out what we can do to plan, what we can do to build new infrastructure to deal with climate change rather than just talk about it. Let's quit talking about it. Let's plan for the future. And Florida is going to continue to be the best place to live, to work, and to play. And as a native of Palm Beach County, I remind everybody all the time, welcome to paradise. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative, and thank you again for helping us with this effort. It also demonstrates, quite frankly, that good things can happen when folks are willing to reach across the aisle, and when you have representatives who are looking at the concerns and the needs of their constituency back home, it really makes a difference. Now, next I'd like to welcome Assistant City Administrator Armando Fana to the podium. Mr. Fana will provide more details about the project, how it will work, and what our residents can expect. Armando?
Thank you, Mayor, Representative. Thank you, members of the media. So one of the things I want to point out is that we're fairly lucky here in the city of West Palm Beach in that a lot of the city's coastal area along the intracoastal are on a ridge. So we're a little bit higher up elevation as opposed to some of the other areas of Florida, particularly south of here. So we do have a little bit of Mother Nature on our side in that sense. But these tidal valves are going to be important, especially stopgap measures, because this is an ongoing issue that we're going to have to deal with over the next few decades. But it's certainly an issue that the tidal valves will certainly help us over the next decade or two in terms of mitigating some of the flooding that we've seen, particularly on Flagler. As the mayor mentioned, there's 35 tidal valves that are going to be installed, and those are going to be ranging from 34th Street to the north, all the way south to South Flagler Court. So that goes all the way down to the south end of the city and very near the edge of the north end of the city. So almost the entire area really along Flagler Drive, both north and south. One thing I also wanted to point out for our residents is these tidal valves will protect on coastal flooding when we have high tide events, king tide events. What we have seen over the last couple of years is you may have a couple of days where you have a rain event, a large rain event that coincides with a king tide, and we saw that just a few weeks ago. These tidal valves will help somewhat with that, but when you have a large rain event combined with tidal increases, that you're still going to have a period of time where the water sits. So I think we have to also temper the residents' understanding of when you have those two things combined, you still are going to have some flooding. But this will greatly mitigate when you just have tidal events like a king tide, preventing the tide from coming in. So we're happy to have the funding. These are big projects that take a lot of resources, and so whatever funding we can get from the state, federal government, will certainly help to help our mitigation efforts over the next few years, and we'll see what comes down with the infrastructure bill that was recently passed and whether we can use some of that for the future as well. The timetable on this is we have several phases. The next phase is going to occur this spring of 2022. We'll begin to see some of the additional installations of these tidal valves. And then some of the larger ones will be occurring throughout the year of 2022 and into the spring of 2023, with hopefully the completion of all of them being at the end of 2023. So it's a phased effort, a multi-year effort. And in addition to that, we're also looking at the drainage outfalls, as the mayor mentioned. The outfalls are where we put the tidal valve, these installations on. But the drainage themselves sometimes need to be upgraded. So as we're looking at these tidal valves and putting them in, we're also upgrading our drainage capacity in certain areas, particularly where we see more flooding. So that's another effort that we're undergoing at the same time as the tidal valves. And eventually, we're going to have to look at raising the seawall, but that is a long-term, very expensive effort and something that we'll have to keep an eye on in terms of available funding in the future to see where we can begin to phase that in over time as well. So that's kind of the details of where we're at and where we're headed over the next year and a half. And then I'll turn it back over to the mayor.
Thank you, Armando. And now we'll open up for any questions you all may have of myself, representative, staff.
Mayor, overall, just can kind of address the overall importance, stress the importance of this specific tidal valve project, and just kind of what does it mean for our residents?
Well, as I mentioned before, flooding along Flagler Drive is it's an inconvenience, but it's also a safety hazard. And when you have situations like king tide, not necessarily a rain event, and you can have, and I've been down on Flagler, the sun is shining, and you got flooding on the streets. So it is a tremendous inconvenience, and we've heard the residents, and certainly it was a priority of my administration to try to work toward a solution. Climate change is real, and so we have to continue to look for proactive measures to help alleviate the effects of it.
You discussed phase 2 and onwards of the project. Can you briefly tell us about phase 1 of the project and kind of what you achieved, if you can, and how many valves have been installed under phase 1 if possible?
Absolutely. Armando, you want to speak to that?
Thank you.
So 4 valves so far have been installed, and the next phase, which is going to begin shortly after the holidays, is going to include 14th Street, 15th Street, and Lilac Court. Those will begin immediately in the spring of 2022. And then the following that is when we get into the other ones. But some of the larger capacity valves or the larger outflows that require larger valves, those are the ones that are going to take a little bit longer because they require special manufacturing.
And in terms of like construction and street traffic, anything that the residents should be aware of as they're driving down or in the area?
It's just going to depend in each location. In some cases, the tidal valves are being installed on the outflows on the seawall, outside the seawall, and there will probably be minimal impact to traffic on those cases. But if we are going deeper into where the outflow, the piping, the plumbing, then that may require some street closures in that case. And we'll alert everybody when there's street closures required for these types of installations.
You had mentioned that there were the pilot program, you had 4 valves installed. One of them was at Greenwood?
Yes.
How did that work out? Did you learn anything from those valves? Because I know there was still some flooding at Greenwood.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've learned, and we got our engineering director here as well who may be able to chime in, but one of the things we've learned is on these outflows, we may have to make adjustments on how as I mentioned, sometimes you can do it right at the outflow by the seawall, but sometimes you may be better off to do it inside, further inside, where the piping goes into the intercoastal. And so that was one of the issues that we learned is changing the location may help them fit better so that you have less water intrusion. So that's one of the things that we've learned. And then also, as I mentioned, the larger capacity outflow valves, those are going to require some specialized construction in terms of getting those types of valves created because of the capacity and the size of those.
It's safe to say this project won't prevent flooding, it'll just help minimize the impact, is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, it'll make a big difference when it's just tidal. If it's just tidal flooding and there's no rain event, it'll make a huge difference because you won't have that water coming in, that intrusion from the tides. But if you combine it with a rain event, then you will still have some flooding.
Have you noticed an increase in the flooding as far as, I know it's spotty, you didn't really have too much until this last storm, and how deep it's going into the streets, like how far west it's pushing you?
We haven't seen it going very far west, and there's pockets of areas in the city, particularly on the north end and a couple on the south end that get the most flooding. It generally drains out within 24 hours or so. But I just as a longtime resident, somebody who grew up here, and talking to longtime residents, you definitely see it, and you didn't see the type of flooding we're seeing now, even 10, 15 years ago. So there's certainly been a change. A lot of it is more nuisance, as the mayor mentioned. It can be dangerous if the flooding gets high enough where it can stall your vehicle, and we've seen some of that. But that's in very small pockets right now, the city, and these tidal valves will help alleviate that when we have high tide events. And hopefully people, when you live in a coastal area, until these mitigation measures are completed, you have to be cognizant of these environmental conditions and understand when you're driving through these neighborhoods during a high tide event. And look, we didn't have to think about king tides 10, 15 years ago. It wasn't in our stream of conscience in terms of things we had to think about. Now we do, because where we live. And so we have to pay attention to these things as residents, as citizens, and understand that if you have a king tide, you may not be wanting to drive on certain areas of Flagler Drive. And we do try to close those down and put signage up when we have these issues. But we need to start thinking a little bit differently too as citizens.
Anything else? All right, well, again, thank you all for your time, and Representative Roth, again, thank you for your assistance with this project, and it will make a difference. Believe me, it will. Thank you again, sir.